Yeah, screen is visible, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So today we're going to start with the second law of thermodynamics. We have covered the first law for a system and then for a control volume, and today we will start with second law of thermodynamics for any process undergoing cycle. Okay, so we will first study cyclic systems. And the second law of thermodynamics is basically it's a law which acknowledges that every process has a certain directionality associated with it. Meaning, a cup of hot coffee will become cold, but it will not become spontaneously hot. Okay, you must heat it. Moreover, let me give you a more absurd uh, example. Suppose this is a car. So you are burning fuel to go up a hill, right? But the reverse does not happen, meaning when the car comes down the hill, the fuel tank doesn't magically get Am I audible? I think I lost connection.
Yes, sir. Now it's okay.
Okay.
Sir, I think it was for everyone in campus. I also lost connection for some.
Okay. So let's proceed. So I have not done anything. I have not said anything. So we have drawn a simple device. Acha, by the way, Sai Saran has shared a link. I do not. I cannot say what that link is on record. But those of you interested can follow the link. I do not know what it is. I do not endorse what it is. But if it is useful, it is useful. Take the hint. Okay, so let's say we consider a system where we have a gas. There's a small impeller and there is a pulley. Okay, this is a pulley and this is a weight. Let's see how this gas can be taken in a cyclic manner. So cyclic manner meaning whatever initial state is, it will go to some eventual state and it will again come back to the initial state. This is what we mean by a cyclic process. So let's see how it can be done. Let's say that the weight gets lowered. Step A, weight is lowered. Okay, so when the weight is lowered, it means that work is done on the system. How is work done on the system? The work is done on the system by means of rotation of this impeller. And so it is doing some work on the gas. Now what has happened? You have done work on the system, so the energy of the gas has gone up, meaning the internal energy has gone up. And so we have reached the eventual state. Okay, this corresponds to the energy in eventual state. Now, how do you go back to the initial state? Because you have added energy to the system, how do you go back? You can simply extract heat from the system so that this gas goes back to its initial state. So eventually it loses heat, minus Q, not Q dot. So extract heat meaning heat lost by the system. So what has happened here? Overall, in going from initial state to eventual state back to initial state, work has been done on the system. So work done, if I also account for the sign, it is minus W, and heat is lost by the system, heat lost. So if I account for the sign, it's going to be minus Q. But let us look at the opposite. Let us look at the opposite. This process should also be very much be possible. So let's copy this. Let us see the following. So let's say first you have the initial state where the mass is now actually lower. Now you add heat to the system. You add heat to the system. So from this heat added to system. So the internal energy goes up. Now what can you do to reduce the internal energy? You can simply make the system perform some work. Work done by the system. Work done by the system. So now if work is done by the system, what will happen to this weight? See, this energy, it has to lose the energy to go back to its initial state. So in order to do that, it has to do some work. When it does work, it will raise the weight. Is that not? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what does that mean? In this entire process, in this hypothetical process, work done by a system, it is W, and heat is transferred to the system, right? So it will be Q. So in that case, both of them are positive, but we know that this cannot happen. Just because you've added heat to the system doesn't mean that the propeller will randomly rotate and it will lift the weight. So a process in which W and Q are both positive and we want a cyclic process is not possible. But the converse was possible, meaning when work was done on the system and when heat was transferred out of the system, this process was possible. Let me again give you an example of how such a possibility and impossibility is built in. Let's say you have a hot reservoir and you have a cold reservoir. If you let this system stay as it is, what will happen? So this is hot, this is cold. So heat will be spontaneously transferred from the hot reservoir to the cold reservoir. And we know this happens. Imagine you take a cup of coffee and you keep it on your table. What will happen? The hot cup will start losing heat to the environment. The environment is like the cold reservoir. But in order to do the reverse, meaning you want heat to be spontaneously transferred from the cold to the hot reservoir, this process will not happen. In order to do this, you have to do a certain amount of work, which you know as refrigeration. So if you take a step back again, in this process, because delta E was 0, right? So delta E is what? As per the first law, it is, or let me write it as E2 minus E1 is equal to Q12 minus W12. So if E2 minus E1 is 0, why? Because we have gone in a cyclic process. Q12 and W12, it cannot have. So over here, what was it? Heat was given to the system and work was also positive. So this can be satisfied. This can be satisfied. Okay, this hypothetical problem that we considered, it satisfies the first law. First law is satisfied. What about this? What about this? Over here also E2 minus E1 is equal to Q12 minus W12 because both the signs are negative. Over here also because E2 minus E1 is 0, Q12 minus W12 is also satisfied by this. So this is also possible by first law. But the first process is not, I mean the first law is very much possible. The second process is not possible. Meaning there has to be an additional law which tells you the impossibility of the second process. The first law will still be valid despite the process not being feasible in reality. Similar to this, you can have this heat transfer. You can go from the hot reservoir to cold reservoir, but you will not have the reverse. You cannot spontaneously have heat going from the cold reservoir to hot reservoir despite the process satisfying the first law. Let us take a simple example of what is called as a heat engine. So let me draw a piston cylinder arrangement like this, in which we have say two stops, two lower stops, so that the piston doesn't go all the way. So this is the piston, and on top of this piston you have a small stand on which you can place masses. Okay, you can place masses on top of this, and here there is initially a gas. So what is the process that we can do for extracting heat, for extracting work from this gas? Let us see. So first of all, let us imagine there is a high temperature reservoir and it exchanges heat. It transfers heat from the high temperature reservoir to the gas. So because of this, what will happen? I'll just freehand draw it. Because of this, the gas will get heated up and it will expand. So the piston goes over here. Okay, the gas will expand. Now, initially, if there is a large block kept over here, so this large block is being pushed up. So because of this heat transfer, the gas is expanding against this mass. The gas expands against a higher pressure. Then what? Let's say there are stops over here as well. So it keeps on expanding up until it hits the stops. So eventually it will sort of hit the stops. So you have heated the gas so that eventually it hits the stops. Okay. Now at this point, what do? You have essentially obtained a certain amount of work done because work is done by the gas. Okay. Over here, work is done by gas to lift this mass. Next thing you do is, because it's already at the stops, you remove this mass. So now mass is removed, and when the mass is removed, you can do this. How does the gas go back to its initial configuration? If someone asks you this, so there is no more weight, but we want to go back to this initial position. What am I doing? The mass is now removed and I want to go back to the initial position. So how do I do that? So first of all, we must remove this high temperature reservoir and we must keep a low temperature reservoir. so that there is heat transfer from the gas to the low temperature reservoir. So this piston will keep going down up until it reaches this position, and it's not just coming back to this position, you must keep transferring heat until you get the zero condition. Okay, until you keep the zero condition. So what has happened in totality? The heating caused expansion, expansion raised mass, mass removed, heat removed, and then again we are ready to do this same cycle. So in this expansion process, you push the mass which is heavier. So you did more work in doing this than in coming back, because in coming back there was no back pressure. We removed this mass. We did not keep this mass. So in this entire process, you effectively did work done by the system. And what else? You essentially did work on the system, and what about the heat?
Sir, heat is.
So
Sir, I
it
So
is
think.
given like Q will be
uh-huh.
positive.
So
Right.
how do you analyze that? So you simply say delta E in going from 1 to 2 is Q12 minus W12. So if E is 0 because you've come back to the initial position. So let's see, Q12 is equal to W12. Because W is positive, then Q also must be positive. Okay? That is the simple logic. So in this process, you have given heat to the system. You have given essentially net amount of it. So if I call this Q1, if I call this Q2, so this will be Q1 minus Q2. I have accounted for the appropriate sign over here as well. So you have given an amount of heat Q1 minus Q2 to the system, and you have extracted an amount of work W12, which is exactly equal to Q1 minus Q2, because there is no change of state of the gas. So delta E is 0. So this kind of process is known as a heat engine. So you try to relate it to the petrol engine that you use. So in that you burn fuel. So burning of fuel is tantamount to supplying a given amount of heat to the engine. That amount of heat is converted into work. Does that make sense? This kind of thing is called as a heat engine. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So the next thing that we will analyze very quickly is a heat engine with steady state components. A heat engine with steady state components. So steady state components, in the last class we saw there are things such as boilers, which is heat exchangers, pumps, turbines, condensers, also kind of heat exchangers. So let us draw the following schematic. We have a boiler, we have a condenser, we have a small pump, and we have a turbine. Okay, so liquid water is pumped into the boiler. Out of the boiler, you get a certain amount of steam which goes into the turbine. The steam is then expanded. Now the expanded steam is very much like almost high quality steam, meaning the X will be very close to 1. So now you must again convert it into water. So here it is like water. So you must convert this steam again to water. So you pass it through a condenser. So a condenser condenses steam. So the output of the condenser is water. But now the water has to be pumped to the boiler. That is why this pump is there. So this is the pump. This is the turbine. This is the condenser. This is the boiler. So in the boiler,
So,
how do you convert water to steam? Yeah, ask.
so I have one doubt, sir. So like
Yeah.
we want to give heat like using the water, like we are heating the water, and from that boiler is heating and it is converting vapor, and from vapor
Hmm.
it is going to turbine.
Hmm.
So, but I'm not in this. able to understand why we are again condensing steam. Can we not heat directly steam and again put it into boiler?
No, you cannot, because the okay. You mean to say this steam directly you want to put it over here? Is this what you're
Yes,
saying?
sir.
But
Yes, sir.
steam already is steam. What? How much? So, if you were to use steam, you don't have to add a lot of heat. So Q12 will be small. If Q12 is small, the W12 will also be small. You get it?
Uh,
So you must
so
start with water. You must add a lot of heat to water so that you can extract a lot of work from the turbine. And the other point is, if you keep bypassing steam to the boiler, you will never operate in a cycle. Eventually, this boiler turbine system will reach steady state. You are not going back to its original. So let me draw the cycle, then it will be clearer to you.
okay,
Let me
so
just draw it. Yeah. So let me call this state 1, state 2, state 3, state 4. At 1, you have high pressure water. At 2, you have high pressure. So you are adding heat. So let me call this QH. QH dot, because it's a rate process. You are continuously having mass flow. So you are continuously adding heat. So QH dot. So then you have high pressure, high temperature water or steam. Then at 3, you extract work from 2 to give low temperature, high quality steam. Low temperature, I mean, it is relatively low, but it is still high. Then 4, you have cold water at low pressure. Actually, the output of the steam turbine is at low pressure. Now, cold water at low pressure, it has to be pumped to the boiler. So again, then you have a pump. So at 1, you have again high pressure water. So through this, through 1, 2, 3, 4 back to 1, you are essentially having no change in state of the water. You are again taking water back to state 1. And so this turbine is creating a certain amount of shaft work. The work extracted is coming out as W dot. Now what do? This W dot, part of it is fed to the pump, partly goes to pump because pump does not require a lot of power, and you will see in calculations why. And the rest of the work, you extract it, you pass it to the alternator where you generate electricity and so on. Okay, so through what is happening at the condenser, essentially Q dot H is being added to the boiler. Now at the condenser, high quality steam is now converted into water. So what is the direction of heat transfer? Heat should be taken out of the steam. So this is Q
yes.
dot L. So essentially Q dot H minus Q dot L, if I consider this entire system as the control volume, so for this control volume, you have Q dot H minus Q dot L, which is the total amount of heat transfer, minus W dot out. W dot is not the turbine work. W turbine, if it is the turbine work, then W turbine minus W pump. So W dot turbine minus W pump is the total amount of work, rate of work that you are getting out of the system. So this will be equal to 0. So essentially, if I rearrange this, W dot output of this entire control volume will be Q dot H minus Q dot L. It is as simple as that. But in order to have this, what did we have to ensure? That E2 minus E1 is 0, meaning I'm calling it E2, but essentially it will be delta E equal to 0. Why? Because you must make the same working fluid go again and again. You are causing the same working fluid to go on again and again. And when we draw it in the PV diagram, TS diagram, it will be exactly clear how these components work. But for now, you must take the working fluid, in this case, which is water, through the entire cycle. So now let us look at what the efficiency is. Is this clear? First of all, what happens at the turbine? I'll draw it clearly separately. This is the turbine. So For turbine, there is some output work, say W dot turbine. Now, a part of this W dot T is going as W dot pump, because the pump also requires certain amount of power to operate. So what you can do, you can couple the shaft of the turbine with the pump, but the pump does not require so much amount of power. So the remaining power, remaining rate of work done, is equal to W dot T minus W dot pump, which is usable by you. So this is what is coming out. Okay, so now what happens at this shaft? This shaft is coupled to an alternator. Has everyone heard of the word alternator? It has 3 coils, R, Y, B, and you get AC signals from the coils because you are rotating something which has permanent magnets. You know how alternator works, right? You've done this in electrical machinery. You know
Yes,
how
sir, we have a basic.
yeah. So fixed, huh? Yes or no? Anyway, so it's a fixed magnet which is rotating in the presence of coils, and that induces a voltage, EMF, and that you can tap. So Y will be out of phase, B will be out of phase. And this 3-phase, you can then step it up, transfer it to a substation, step it down. I mean, you know how the rest works. Electrical transmission, basically. So now let us figure out the efficiency of the entire cycle, the heat engine. We define the efficiency of the heat engine as follows. We say that the thermal efficiency of the heat engine is what we seek divided by what we supply. And what do we seek? We seek a certain amount of work done. So we seek work done. If it's a piston cycle, it's work done over the heat supplied. If it's a continuous process, meaning if there is mass flux going through the system, it's a steady state system, then it will be W dot over QH dot. And this will be simply QH minus QL over QH. And what will be this? This will be QH dot minus QL dot over QH dot. This will be 1 minus QL dot over QH dot, and this will be 1 minus QL over QH. How could we write W dot is equal to QH dot minus QL dot? We simply apply the first law of thermodynamics to the big control volume, which encompasses all the steady state, steady flow devices in the control volume. Okay? Let me write down some typical thermal efficiencies. So for petrol engines, it can be in the range of 30% to 40%. For very large petrol engines, large diesel / petrol engines, it can be 40 to 45%. But those small Luna or TVS XL, I mean 2-stroke, very small engines, it can be very low. It can be 20 to 25%. Big engines are efficient, okay, but they're difficult to maintain. And for power plants, a very good power plant, I think the Lyngby power plant had 45% efficiency. Let me just quickly check it. Thermal efficiency Lyngby power plant. So the Lyngby power plant had an efficiency. So there is a power plant in Denmark. It's a thermal power plant, and it was one of the most efficient power plants of its time. I don't know whether it still is. Okay. Anyway, it's above 45%. It's something like 45% to 50%. So as you can imagine, if this is the efficiency, so let us put it into perspective. So the rate of work output over the rate of heat input is 0.3 for a good engine. Meaning of all the heat that you transfer, only like 30% of that heat is being converted into work. What happens to the remaining? The remaining 70%, what is it, guys?
It loses to
Lost, sir.
It loses to surroundings. Very good. You must lose heat to the surrounding. You cannot operate. You cannot operate this kind of cycle by never losing heat to the surrounding. You cannot do it by never losing heat to the surrounding. You must always have loss to the surrounding. Okay? You must always have loss to the surrounding. We will get back to the generalization of this statement. But before that, let us quickly look at the second process that we looked at. So this heat engine business is basically this process that I spoke about. This generalization was the heat engine. Okay. Now let us look at this. This is equally important. Without this, you will not be able to live comfortably in summers. So you have a hot reservoir, you have a cold reservoir, and your aim is, so you are basically in the hot reservoir, meaning you are a person sitting in the hot room. You want to somehow transfer heat from cold to hot. Now, we know that this doesn't happen. So we must devise something by virtue of which this happens. Now, let me first draw this. Let me draw this. This is what you demand. So let's say something like this happens. And let me draw, let me erase this. Let me draw a black box like this. What happens in the black box? It extracts a certain amount of heat and it sends to this imaginary box. So this is QH dot, or it could be QH also if it's a control mass, and this is QL dot. So what can we write about this control volume? This control volume 0. So if this black box operates in a cycle, this will be equal to, so heat received by the system is QL dot, heat lost by the system is QH dot minus W dot. So W dot will be equal to QL dot minus QH dot. Okay, so now work must be done on the system. We must perform a certain amount of work. So this is W dot. And the work done is on the system. So what we can do is, I can account for the sign and we can account for the sign over here. So this also becomes plus. So we have accounted for this sign. So what does this mean? W dot is QH dot minus QL dot. W dot is a positive quantity. By accounting for the negative sign, this minus W dot is the negative quantity. So what does it mean? QH dot is larger than QL dot. So in order to extract some amount of heat from the cold reservoir, you are giving work into the system. You are doing work on the system, and the cumulation of QL dot and W dot. So if I rearrange this further, QL dot plus W dot is the amount of heat transferred to the hot reservoir. So what I said was not entirely correct. You are basically sitting over here. So you are continuously extracting heat from the cold reservoir. This is you sitting in an air conditioned room, and you are rejecting heat to the hot environment, which is the hot ambient outside. Okay, outside it is 50 degrees Celsius, inside it is 20 degrees Celsius. So you're continuously extracting heat from the cold room, but you have to give in certain amount of work. So in your typical experience, what is this minus W dot? Where is this minus W dot coming from? W dot, where does it come from?
So is it condenser?
No, forget about the condenser at the moment.
Electricity.
It is the electricity. You are basically supplying this work to the system in the form of electrical energy or electrical power. Okay, so the electrical power then rotates the compressor. It does all the things. So whatever in the black box it consumes power, it will consume this much amount of power. Now we know from experience that inside the black box we have a compressor. That compressor consumes power. Okay, so this is how it works. So now let us do a simplification of this system, very much similar to the heat engine for a continuous flow system. So we will draw the following. We will have the compressor. We will have what is known as the condenser. We will have what is known as a thermostatic expansion valve or a capillary valve or a throttling valve, and we will have an evaporator. Evaporator, condenser, expansion valve, also known as the throttle valve, and compressor. So compressor input is at low pressure, compressor output is at high pressure. So if, let me call this 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1 is cold vapor, but high quality. Compressor is high pressure, high temperature. Then condenser, high pressure, low temperature. Actually, not high pressure, low temperature. High pressure, low quality. I mean, forget about these for now, but I'm just telling you how it goes in the cycle. 4 is low pressure, low temperature, low quality. So essentially, it is now going back to the same system. So essentially, in this system also, delta E will be 0. Now this compressor, it is consuming work. So you have to do work on the compressor. So this minus W dot I'm accounting. Once again, I'm saying whenever I write minus W dot is a positive quantity. But the fact that it is being fed into the system, I'm accounting for that fact through this minus sign. One should not be confused by this. Okay, so it extracts heat from the condenser. So this is QL dot, and the condenser rejects heat to the ambient through QH dot. Okay, this is how the entire cycle works. Now, even in this cycle, if I draw the control volume like this, for this entire control volume, what do we have? We have delta E is 0. This is equal to Q dot 12 minus W dot 12. Uh, because it's going in the same loop, I will simply say summation of Q dot minus summation of W dot. So this implies what is heat absorbed by the system? It is QL dot. Heat rejected by the system is minus QH dot, and work, so minus of minus W dot. Okay, this is equal to 0. Now, for a refrigeration system, how do we define the sort of efficiency of the system? In refrigeration systems, we do not define the efficiency like a, just mute whoever is getting messages. Okay, so for refrigeration systems, we do not define the thermal efficiency like we did for the heat engine. Instead, we define what is known as the coefficient of performance. We call it beta, and this is equal to what is sought over what is input. Now, for a refrigeration system, what is sought? What is sought by you? What do you seek out of a refrigeration system?
So temperature.
Yes, so you are seeking a specific rate of extraction of energy from your room. So it is QL dot. So you are seeking QL dot, and what is the input to the system?
W.
So it's the W dot. Very good. Okay, this is called as the coefficient of performance. Now, what is the W expression for W dot? So this will be QL dot over QH dot minus QL dot, because we have already seen that W dot is QH dot minus QL dot. Alright, so if I rearrange this, I get 1 over QH dot over QL dot minus 1. For a control mass, this same expression will be QH over QL minus 1. Now, typical household refrigerators, household fridge, it will have a coefficient of performance something between 2.5 and 3.5. Okay, the deep freezer You'll have a lower coefficient of performance. It will be something close to 1. Okay, so there is this. So far we have understood what? We have understood how things can be taken in a cyclic process in order for us to do a certain amount of work or to extract a certain amount of heat. These processes are not possible without work outputs. Okay, so now we come to the formalization of the two statements in the form of the second law of thermodynamics. Second law of thermodynamics. So the formalization of the two statements, the first statement is known as the Kelvin-Planck statement. Okay, this is Lord Kelvin, this is Max Planck. It's the same people, the famous people. So what does the Kelvin-Planck statement say? It says that it is impossible to have a cycle whose sole work, okay, it is impossible to have a cycle or a device which operates in a cycle basically, which has no other effect than to raise weight, which does only raise weight and exchange with a single reservoir, with high temperature reservoir. Meaning you cannot have a high temperature reservoir which supplies heat to the system as QH dot and all of QH dot is converted into W dot. You cannot have such a system. In order for this system to actually legitimately create work, you must have a certain amount of QL dot as well. So this particular impossibility, the Kelvin-Planck statement does away with. So Kelvin-Planck says that it is impossible for a device to operate in a cycle, or it is impossible to construct a cycle whose sole work is to raise weight. When they say that the sole output is to raise weight, it means the sole output of this device which operates in a cycle is to give work. Okay, it is to do work on something. Okay, it is impossible to extract work from this device by solely exchanging heat with a single reservoir. So if this were true, if the first law were true, for the first law we can simply write Q is equal to W dot. First law is valid. But this Kelvin-Planck statement tells us that this is not valid. And these are sort of the founding stones for the development of entropy. Okay, so now that we have the Kelvin-Planck statement which says that the heat engine must supply heat to the ambient, let us look at the second statement which formalizes whatever we have studied so far. The second statement is known as the Clausius statement. So what does the Clausius statement say? It is impossible to have a device operating in a cycle whose sole work is to extract heat from a low temperature reservoir and transfer it to a high temperature reservoir. Okay, no device which operates in a cycle whose sole work or sole purpose, let's not use the word work, is to extract heat from low temperature and give heat to high temperature. This is not possible. Now we know that in order for someone to do so, what is required? What needs to be done?
Burden should be done on the system.
So some amount of work should be done on the system. Only then you can have such a valid statement. Okay. Now we have two different statements, but you should ask the question, wait, why are there two different statements if everything is self-consistent? One statement should imply the other statement, no? Because whatever we have studied so far, this process or the engine process, it is fundamentally saying that you cannot sort of have a ambiguous directionality of the problem. The directionality of the problem is fixed. QH getting work, some heat is rejected, while QL going to QH, some work has to be done. So all of this must also be consistent. If they were not to be consistent, then the second law would be on very shaky grounds. So let us show you, let us show that the two statements are indeed consistent. So let me first draw the high temperature reservoir. Let us do a thought device. So this is the high temperature reservoir. Let me also draw a low temperature reservoir. So this is the low temperature reservoir. Now let me draw two cycles. The first cycle is something like this. Let me draw first two cycles, and let's say we have a heat engine like this. So we have QH over here and QL over here. And what is the amount of work output of the system? It will be W is equal to QH minus QL by first law. And we know that this is not violating the Kelvin statement. Now let's say we have another statement which actually violates the Clausius statement, meaning QL is being extracted and QL is also being pushed. So first law has to be valid, so both of them have to be QL because there is no work input. So this is an impossible cycle, impossible, but this is very much possible. This does not violate the Kelvin's statement. Now let me draw a control volume like this. In fact, let me draw it like this. So for the pink control volume, what do we have in totality? For pink control volume, what is the total amount of heat transfer with the lower reservoir? See, QL is going to the reservoir and QL is being extracted from the reservoir. So in totality, heat transfer from QL, what is it? What is heat transfer from QL?
So 0.
It will be 0. And what is heat transfer from, sorry, not Q, heat transfer from TL. If I call this TL, low temperature reservoir, high temperature reservoir. From TL is 0. Heat transfer from TH was, what is it?
0.
Why is it 0? Heat transfer from TH?
No, sir. QH minus QL. Sorry.
Very good. It will be QH minus QL. And what is the net output of this pink control volume, work output?
So it's work done. QH minus QL.
So it is QH minus QL, which is essentially W. So fine, let me now draw this pink control volume and let me represent these facts. So essentially by violating the Clausius statement, over here this impossible thing, we have violation of Clausius statement. So the violation of the Clausius statement has led to what? What is this violating?
Sir, Kelvin Planck.
It is violating the Kelvin-Planck statement. So by creating a cycle which violates the Clausius statement, we have created a cycle which violates the Kelvin-Planck statement. This is not Kevin Peterson, it's Kelvin-Planck. Okay. So in today's class, we have formally seen the two statements of the second law of thermodynamics. Tomorrow, our agenda will be as follows. We will study about the reversible process, about which you do have an idea. After studying reversible process, we will study reasons for irreversibility. After which we will wrap it up with the Carnot cycle, and that's it. That will be covered tomorrow. And yes, of course, the corollaries of this, which is the thermodynamic scales. The corollary of this will be the thermodynamic scale. This is what we plan to do tomorrow, and that will be the end of chapter 7. Chapter 7 is a brief, it's not a very large chapter. And already I will share with you the problems today. Already with this information in head, you will be able to start solving certain problems. Okay, these are concepts. Remember, these are mostly concepts. There will be some ideas. So based on these concepts, the Carnot cycle will be developed, on which there will be very simple problems. The problems are really, really simple in this chapter. It is important for you to understand the genesis of the problem rather than having just the ability to solve problems. And the corollary of this whole second law business will be the manifestation of a thermodynamic scale. Okay. So with this, we wrap up today's class. Any doubts so far?